I start with the political process. There's a rather funny little ceremony that takes place in the House of Lords when a bill's completed its course, by which the bill having been vigorously debated, at the end of it, the leaders of the different political parties in the House of Lords go off and put on the most wonderful fancy dress, including tricorn hats, and they appear as commissioners of Her Majesty for giving the royal assent. And as the clerk of the House of Lords reads out the words La Reine le volte, Norman French, the Queen wills it, they doff their hats in acceptance of the bill having gone through, thereby acknowledging, for all of us, that of course we are subject to the law and that the law as enacted by Parliament has been approved. When I go and talk to sixth forms sometimes, they have this idea that Parliament is about the majority imposing its will on the minority, and of course votes are taken and the majority does prevail. But in actual fact, the process of debate, the political process in a democracy, a parliamentary democracy, is about how we enact laws in a way which means that the minority is prepared to accept the majority's decision. And in countries where that doesn't happen, and it's happened in this country, in Northern Ireland context, you can see how the fabric of society starts to unravel. So in fact, the political process is a process of debate, the process by which we moderate each other's views so as to try through it to come up with a solution which is viable. And of course, we challenge each other's views constantly, often in a way which people find much too confrontational. And indeed, I think there's a lot to be said that we are too confrontational. But that's what the debating process is about. And then we move to the Commons. Somebody once said there is no job description for members of Parliament, and there isn't. I sit on was sitting on the Standards and Privileges Committee since I left office, and we were looking at this issue. There is no job description, except actually the prayers, I suppose, at the start of the day's sitting in the House, when, interestingly, we are asked to put aside all private prejudices and affections in carrying out our work. And there, I think, you have the two issues. The process of politics is about the engagement of debate so that we can try and take rational and well-based decisions which have been challenged as they are taken, without shortcuts. Once, in 1997, when I first got into Parliament, there was a very nice New Labour MP who said she thought that second reading debate should be got rid of because it was quite clear that Labour had a majority at that time. But actually, they are rather important. And the second thing is that the common good is putting aside those private prejudices and affections for the purpose of trying to identify what is good for collectively. Of course, what may be a collective good may have an adverse impact on certain people. If you're going to build a railway line through my constituency, then the people living alongside it will feel that they've been adversely affected, but that in itself is not a reason why it might not be for the wider public benefit for the railway line to be so constructed. And those are the issues that we have to tease out as politicians. If politicians seek the common good, they're not always going to get it right, and of course the common good in a human and fallible society will often not be readily identifiable, and reasonable people will have disagreements as to what that good may be. But if we strive to put aside the personal interests, then the chances are, and actually the history of this country shows, that on the whole, we've probably tended to come up with more correct decisions than ones that are incorrect, as the progress of human society in this country has shown. People get depressed about the way we operate and are progressing, but actually, overall, as I think the Queen rightly pointed out in her Golden Jubilee, the progress of British society in the 50 years that she'd then been Queen, you could see that standards of living, quality of life, for the vast majority of people, probably everybody, had risen substantially in that time. And that is not independent of politics. Two final quick points. Immigration and welfare. I simply tease these out. I disagree very slightly on the immigration point. I'm not sure it's an economic one. Politicians may like to think it is. It's interestingly a quality of life issue. People are frightened that their quality of life is going to be diminished by immigration because the pace of change around them causes them alarm, whether it's the natural environment being built on or the changes of recognition, the things that are familiar to them. A very interesting conundrum that we may be able to tease out. And finally, on welfare, I simply say this. Nobody wants to live in a society, I certainly don't, in which people can't be provided for who are in need. Human need needs to be responded to. But equally, we need to try to make people independent so that they are not dependent on the state, or indeed ultimately their neighbours if possible, but if they need that help, they've got to get it. All I'll say about food banks is that imperfect as they may be in my constituency, they seem to be quite a powerful vehicle for people's problems being addressed when they come in for food and actually resolved so that they become less dependent as a consequence. And so before I go out and condemn food banks as being a sign of society falling apart, the curious thing I see in the context of those who deliver the service in my area is that in many cases it seems to actually be helping people resolve some of the issues which have led them to come there in the first place. Thank you.